Hello everyone, Reza here. Welcome to another Unreal Engine video. In this one, we're exploring modeling tools inside Unreal Engine 5. The modeling tools provide simple ways for creating and sculpting static meshes directly in Unreal Engine. You can use it to create new meshes, rapidly prototype level geometry, and edit existing models to add variety to your world. This tutorial outlines the concepts behind some of these tools and their workflows, how to access them, and the basics of working with them. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. All right, let's get started. What I have in this scene is just few ready-to-go assets that I managed to download and put together through Quixel Bridge. I have a full video on that, how to access it, how to bring assets in, how to take care of the hierarchy through the content browser, so on and so forth. So I just didn't want to deal with a boring grid to begin with. So I've got something to work with right off the bat. Now let's talk about how to bring the modeling editor and how to load that into the scene, because after all, it's a plugin. So with the Unreal Engine open, you go to Settings and Plugins, and in here just type in Modeling. Then you have Modeling Tools Editor at your disposal, still in beta version, but gets the job done. So I've already gone ahead and loaded the plugin, but if you don't have it, tick that and go restart the engine, and then you will have access that through here. So you go select mode drop down, then select modeling. Alternatively, press Shift 5 to immediately switch to this mode. Now this is the modeling editor window. We've got two windows. One window is a list of all the modeling tools, which by the way, we cannot get into every single one of them because that takes maybe 24 hours, not 1 hour. And the next one is the window right next to it, which serves as the property window. So basically anything that you select here, you will see the properties and attributes to adjust the selected tool. We have different categories, nice and organized. The first category shows you how to create primitives, and you can see even we've got some create buttons still turned on in poly modeling as well, but the rest of them are not enabled at the moment. The reason for that is they are editing and deformation and transformation tools as opposed to creation tool. So with that out of the way, now we know how to load the plugin. Let's go over one more tip that you kind of need to be mindful of at any point of time during the modeling process. If you feel like the scene starts slowing down, there are a few things that you can do to sort of alleviate the pressure from your system. The main culprit every time you use modeling tool and your scene starts slowing down is the use of signed distance field, or SDF. So if you go into settings and project settings, just in the search bar, look for mesh distance tool. Now this mesh distance tool is a great feature, and that allows Unreal Engine to calculate dynamic ambient occlusion. So it works by sorting the distance to the nearest surface in a volume texture. Now, it may sound a bit confusing what I'm talking about, but if your scene starts slowing down, just turn it off. As a matter of fact, I believe there's a way to show you what nearest surface I'm talking about. I believe if I go to show and go to visualize, there should be a mesh distance field here, which turns your geometry into a voxelized volume looking shape. And that's what Unreal Engine uses to calculate the shadows and ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to go into visualize and turn that off. Another option to help the situation is to turn off lumen and nanite, and only then when you finish with your modeling, enable them back on. But usually on a solid gear, you're not going to experience any of those issues. Another thing that you need to be mindful of is this drop down here. Always put editing LOD, level of detail, to max available. You don't want to limit yourself. And new asset location, you can put that in your current folder. You can put that into auto-generated folder, which is a global thing, or auto-generated folder, which is world related. If I go into content browser, just to clarify it a bit further, this underscore generated and name of my computer, you can see I already have a box in there, and that's where it stores all the primitives I create. If you're unhappy with this generated underscore generated and you would like to kind of follow a very specific pipeline, you can always go and click on this gear icon and change the name here. So that's where you actually can help the organization a little bit. Auto-generated and auto-save. Auto-generate but do not auto-save, and interactive prompt to save. And of course you can just customize the name of the folder. You can ask Unreal not to create a subfolder if you don't want to. So in my case, that was actually the case. So if I close this, you can see inside that there is a subfolder, and inside the subfolder there are my primitives you can find, but again, totally up to you. There is really no right or wrong way. Now, with that out of the way, I'm going to press G on my keyboard to hide all the lighting gizmos and go to the next chapter to see how we can create using modeling editor tool. All right, here I am, ready to go. Let's explore shape rollout. And shape rollout is fairly straightforward. One of the things that you can actually have a very accurate guess without even trying it. It creates new static mesh models using simple primitives. That includes a cube, a sphere, cylinder, cone, torus, and few flat items like a rectangle or disc or a staircase. Now, once you're happy with your model, let's say I'm happy with the staircase, you can go ahead and press complete. If you want to change some of these attributes before creation, that's actually fairly easy. You go in there and say, well, step width, I'm happy with 150. If you're unhappy, you can change it here, go 200, and now all of a sudden you have 200. You can change the step height to a different value, let's say 15, and you can see now the distance between each step is lower. You can have step depth. So based on what you pick, the attributes are going to be different. You can have a material ready to go, so assign the material here and create it. So I click, and then I still can click and create more staircases, so I can actually go in here and create another one right next to it, which I don't want. And once you're done, you go ahead and click on complete. And that's what you have, a brand new staircase. Now, a lot of these attributes are actually similar in the shapes rollout. You click on that and you can see, for example, for a box, we have subdivision, which is set to 1 and 1 and 1. If I go and switch to wireframe, you can see that cube or box is super low poly. You can change that if you want to get a much denser model. You can go in here and set that to 10 and 10 and 10, and all of a sudden you see that what I'm getting, the representation, the wireframe, it's actually super detailed. So that's another way of doing this. We've got polygroup mode, which is actually quite important, but I would rather talk about that in the next chapter, because that gives us a really good starting point when we talk about editing mode. So we'll leave that out for now, and the rest is fairly self-explanatory. So there's really not much to talk about in terms of the primitives. You already hopefully know the purpose of these attributes. We really don't change them. You can just go and try out the other attributes within the properties window. For example, target surface, you can pick that to be set to ground level, because your floor may not necessarily align with the grid, with the ground level. But if they're on the same level, then it really doesn't matter what you pick. So stuff like this is actually very straightforward, very easy to understand. Let's move on to the other create menu. Now the other create menu draws static meshes just like shapes, but with custom shapes and paths. So we've got poly extrude, path extrude, and path revolve, and they're really truly rely on your grid. I'm just going to switch to top view because that gives me the grid. I can go and enable the grid. Let's say I want to use this poly extrude, and it actually allows you to use your grid, and you can even zoom in and use this grid right here. If you feel like you want to sort of hide some of these objects to see the grid clearly, you sure can. Now you can go in here and start clicking and use that align yellow pale line to sort of go with the straight line and come up with a shape. There's really no right or wrong way here. Once you click, then it asks for how much extrusion you want to get. Obviously from the top view you won't be able to see it, but that's no problem. Without doing anything, you can actually go in here and switch from top to perspective and look at that. I can design or define rather how tall my extrusion is going to be for the base I'm creating. Now you may have noticed if I click, it's all done. I can go complete. I can press F to frame it, but you may have noticed that I'm actually going through the order here. So output is a static mesh, and then with polygons I'm doing a freehand sort of work. I can start with a circle, square, rectangle, and then I can interactively extrude it. Instead of doing it interactively where I say when to stop, you can actually give that a fixed height, which is a kind of difficult thing to do unless you're very, very accurate with your measurements. And you can just have that as a flat plane that you just created. So it's going to be more of a 2D shape if you want. You can tweak your snapping options, snap to axis, snap to edge, snap to vertices of other models if you want, and of course you can give that a material. So you can see it's actually fairly straightforward. There's really not much to it. If I go and change that to circle and set that one to fix 100, if I click I can draw a circle, but because I defined the height, I'm getting 100 units as my extrusion. All done, click, problem solved. So very straightforward, very intuitive. I can go ahead and delete these two. The other one is path extrude, where it actually not only allows you to create a profile, but actually gives that profile a thickness, and then you can extrude it. Again, if I click on it, the options will give you the order and makes it a lot easier. So it says it's going to be a static mesh, path mode is going to be interactive, and extrude is going to be interactive, and then you can assign the material if you want to. So let's give that a try. For example, I'm just going to follow this grid to be very straightforward with my example. You can see first step done, and then path mode or the width mode is still interactive. And if you look at the left hand side, I'm actually changing the measurement, and you see the live update. You click, and then you can start with the thickness of your model. Again, extrude mode set to interactive, click, you're done, complete. Now if you look at the options, for example, you've got round corner here where you can actually define a round corner. If I turn that on, you still can define it interactively, or you can give that a fixed value, but the order stays the same. So it defines the path, then it rounds the corner, then it goes to the radius of the path, and it allows you to specify the extrusion interactively. So let's give that a try again. We're going to click, 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 and it can be any type of path. Click and click. Next is to define the radius for the path, the width, and then I define how much roundness I'm getting, right? And then I can define how much extrusion I would like to get. Again, very intuitive, very straightforward. I personally feel very comfortable with this type of modeling tool. It just makes sense. Another one is path revolve, which allows you to create a profile. Let's say I want to put a jar right next to my staircase. All I need to do is to go in here and try to think about, all right, how will I be able to create a profile for that jar? So I'm just going to create one like so, and I end it somehow in the middle of the axis. Go and close that, and voila, I get to have that jar created in no time. I go accept and move that up, and I know it's a bit clunky. I could have smoothed it better, but you can always smooth it. You can add to it, change this via extra editing tool, part of the modeling tool, but at least what I have does work for time being. You can go in here and change some of it. I can go to scale and start sort of changing that a little bit, or I can do it proportionately and get some sort of results. I can move that one right here, pressing F, and I can somehow scale it a little bit. That is better. Put that on the ground, or hopefully you guys remember end button on the keyboard will get the job done. Again, same thing. I'm going to bring my mega scan, and probably it's a good idea to select this item and duplicate it. So I'm going to hold down Alt and duplicate it. And guess what? I did it intentionally because duplication is the next one I'm going to talk about. Mesh duplicate right here. It's an amazing tool. Why? Because if I bring this little guy forward, and I'm just going to press Alt and create another duplication, and let's say I want to tweak it, right? So the next natural step is to go in here and start tweaking some of these attributes. So if let's say I go in here and say, all right, you know what, I'm just going to select all of these and I'm going to move it up a little. The problem with that is if I go accept, the other one changes too, because one is an instance of the other. So basically I'm dealing with one geometry, different variations, but the parent geometry always forces all the copies to follow the same tweaks. That can be annoying because sometimes you would like to add variations to the same model, get different types of a model. In moments like this, you actually go ahead and mesh duplicate it if you want to change the components of the geometry. I'm not talking about translate, rotate, scale. I'm talking about pulling and pushing verts, edges, and faces. So that can be quite handy if you wish to use it. Now, with that out of the way, we pretty much covered the create and shape rollout. Let's go into polymodel and trimodel to learn more about editing. But before that, I actually have no choice but to talk about polygroups to begin with. So let's go to the next chapter and explore polygroups. And with the help of polygroups, we can start editing our existing objects. Now let's talk about some key concepts in Unreal Engine 5. Now the modeling tool in Unreal Engine is very similar to its counterparts in other modeling software packages. So we have bevel, we have insert edge loop, just like application packages like Maya or Blender. But there are some few important actually key differences in how this tool operates and structures. First thing you guys need to be mindful of is the importance of triangle for Unreal Engine 5. So anything and everything gets rendered as a triangulated mesh in Unreal Engine 5. So it doesn't matter if you create or model something in Maya, as soon as you bring it into Unreal Engine 5, it gets triangulated. And the reason that it's happening because Unreal Engine just cannot simply render a fully quad mesh. It has to be triangulated. Now, this can potentially create limitations, but it's not a limitation because of the polygroups. So simply because Unreal Engine does not natively recognize quads or even n-gons, this functionality gets supported by polygroups. Now, polygroups are collections of triangles, which can be defined by a variety of tools in this modeling editor. So as long as you have polygroups, you can actually select a bunch of quads and n-gons even with nothing to worry about. Let's actually have a look and see the modes of the pre-existing polygroups as well as how to create our own custom polygroup. I'm gonna start with the no-brainer one with the box. Now you can see that in the box we have polygroup mode, and we've got three types: per shape, per face, and per quad. And usually per face is the default. If I go ahead and click and go complete, let's say I'm just going to look at it from a wireframe point of view. There are a lot of triangles that I need to select in order to select this top section altogether. Now, with the help of polygroups, you don't need to do that. And polygroup mode face does exactly that. It actually selects the top face, side face, front face, bottom face, each one of them as a separate polygroup. And cancel that. Let's see how we can access them. You go to Poly Edit, and as soon as I hover my mouse, you can see now that each side has got its own polygroup. I can select the polygroup, I can shrink it, I can select the polygroup, I can rotate it, I can select the polygroup, I can pull it or push it. So that's the advantage that you get with polygroups. You don't need to select every single triangle. You have a polygroup to do that for you. Another type of polygroup is not a face, but it's called quad. So if I go and select per quad and click to create, and I'm going to press F. If I go to Poly Edit to edit the polygons, you can see now I get that good old division of 10 subdivisions on each side, because that's what I specified to begin with. And this is familiar to us. Although behind the scene there are a bunch of triangles, the representation is very familiar to us. That's why knowing the key concept and the importance of the triangle allows us to understand how Unreal Engine is trying really hard to make us happy. Because now we're actually seeing quads, and each quad that I'm selecting is a polygroup, and make the whole editing a lot easier for us. I can actually select a bunch of polygroups, go in there and apply a tool like extrusion, and with that selected I can just go ahead and modify it. So again, importance of polygroup is extremely important. There is a third mode in polygroups, ready to go preset polygroup, and that is per shape, which turns the entire geometry into a polygroup. Now if I go in here and go to Poly Edit, hover my mouse, all of a sudden everything is one polygroup. So With that said, let's talk about how we can actually create our own polygroups and not to rely on primitives. Because, for example, something like this, we just made that very quickly out of path revolve. So there was no options to know where or what mode to choose for polygroup. So what am I going to do in this one? Well, the good news is you can actually paint on triangles and turn them to polygroups. First of all, let's learn how to view polygroups, because unless I go to poly edit, I really can't tell if this staircase has got a polygroup, if this vase has got a polygroup. So let's see how we can visualize it. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go to paint new polygroups. So there's another one, generate polygroups, which we'll talk about, but go with paint new polygroups. And all of a sudden you can see what a crazy town that one is. Because if I go to poly edit right now, you probably are going to see what type of result am I going to get. It's mainly quad, but what I want is, for example, I want this top section to be a polygroup. I want the neck to be a separate polygroup. I want the rest of the model to be a separate polygroup. So we can totally do that by using the paint mode. Now with the paint mode, you've got the brush size, and the brackets are going to do the same thing. Obviously the action is to brush it, not to fill it, which you can. You can do poly lasso like Photoshop, sort of have a selection around your object to isolate it and receive a polygroup. But for now, I'm interested in brush. You can clear, unfreeze, freeze if you want. It's just fairly straightforward, that artisan tool that we know and love. So I can go in there and select all of that and go accept and turn that into a polygroup. Now if I go into here, oh, I missed one. I can just go and repeat the same thing into polypaint and start painting it all. I think I got it this time. We'll see what happens. I'm gonna go to poly edit, and there we have it. Now this guy is actually a polygroup. See how easily now I can select a bunch of selected triangles in a form of an n-gon or quads and operate with it the way that I want. We can continue with our polygroup scenario. I'm just going to scroll all the way down to go to group paint, and I can say, all right, I would like this area to be a polygroup. So I'm just going to very sort of carefully approach that. I'm going to press shift to delete in here, and I'm going to press shift to delete some of these polygroups in here. Yes, this will have an impact on the rest of the polygroups, but after all, that's something that I want. I'm going to kind of fill the areas that I want to have. Let's see what we have. That looks pretty good, except now if I scroll into this area, you can see I've got one polygroup here, one polygroup here, and one polygroup here. Amazing. So you can see how easily you can customize your polygroups. You can have another polygroup here, you can have another polygroup here, and it's kind of like a selection set. If you have worked with selection sets in Maya, that's pretty much it. The other polygroup scenario, or button rather, that you have is group generator, and that group generator is going to generate polygroups for you based on your threshold. So it looks at the normals and it gives you a threshold and divides your geometry into a bunch of polygroups. As a matter of fact, it's not too bad. If I select that and go all the way to poly edit, I'm getting a really good result right off the bat. A really easy way to create polygroups so you can apply modeling tools to your object. So there are other ways of creating polygroups. For example, triangle selection kind of gives you the same result, where you actually select triangles like that. Again, very similar to the tool that we just learned polygroup paint. So that pretty much does the same thing. You go in here and select bunch of verts. I think I selected some extra ones here. I'm going to delete that. And you create polygroup and you go accept. So when you go to poly edit, you can see that this bit is a separate polygroup. So there are many ways of creating polygroups. And you can see we mainly use tri-model and polymodel, and of course I personally somehow manage to always go to these two buttons to create polygroups, and it's under attribute rollout. Now attribute rollout gives us a lot of goodies, to be honest with you. It sort of configures different attributes of your static mesh, such as normals and tangents and polygroups and other parameters. You can sort of paint materials with the material edit tool in here, but maybe a different discussion for another tutorial where I actually put everything into a case study. For now, we know polygroups. Let's very quickly get into polymodel and try model and model something meaningful. All right, let's put what we know into practice in a modeling sense and see if we can somehow model a simple prop. I'm going to switch to modeling, Shift 5 on your keyboard, and let's see how we can model something like this. A cannon with a base, 4 wheels, a barrel, very, very simple. Few balls on the side, using what we've learned so far and hopefully a little bit more. So to create the base, we need basically 3 simple parts. The first part is a cube, and I'm going to press complete or create. I'm going to press F and go straight into poly edit. Now poly edit, the good thing about poly edit is you just deal with polygroups, and we just talked about it. You can see that we can just select polygroups and use it. I'm going to move it forward and basically select this edge right here and move that up ever so slightly. I'm going to select the back face, the polygroup that I'm selecting, and I'm going to do a simple extrude and basically push that back a little. I'm going to go accept, and that's just one part of the model, the base. Now again, going to polygroup, and this time I'm going to go to shape edit, insert edge loop, and insert an edge loop like so. I'm going to go accept, going to polygroup, select these components using try select tool. So I can go in here and use the try select tool to select triangle like so. Go in here, and with that I can just turn that into a polygroup and accept. Next time I go to polygroup, I have this piece as a ready to go selection set. I can now go in here and extrude that a little and increase the size of it just a tad. Yep, that's exactly what I wanted. Now I need 2 pieces to go side by side. So that's the middle part, and I need 2 sort of supporting pieces on both sides. Again, I can do that with a good old rectangle. I can give that an extrusion. I can do it with a box, or I can, believe it or not, can use a simple staircase. With that staircase, all I need is 3, and it's not too bad. The width is pretty high, so I can just change the width, and I can go in here and increase its size, move it to a side, and rotate it 180 degrees, minus 180 in z-axis. And with that, I can actually go to poly edit now, select this piece and extrude it out. Perfect. That looks very good. I can go accept, move this thing forward a little because we need to make sure that this actually sits on this piece right here. So only thing I need to do with this piece is to somehow reduce its thickness to something like 0.3. That's better. Now I can bring this piece up, move it up like so, and bring it back to position. So see, these are the adjustments that you kind of need to make in order to get the design that you want. And now I can just push that in. Next piece, you can either hold down Alt and give that another copy. Another way of doing this is to mirror it like so. So we have the mirror tool under try model. You can mirror and append, so basically keep the original and mirror, or you can actually flip the existing model that you have. We obviously want to mirror, and you can do left, right, up, down in different axes. What we have is going to work just fine. The difference is now these two are one model. Now let's go through the wheels and get those done. Well, it's actually fairly simple. Good old cylinder will get the job done. Obviously the height is massive, we really don't need that. And again, always think about how much details I need. For example, in here I immediately noticed that I did not give it enough subdivision, so take 2, but this time I'm gonna go and give the radius slices enough subdivision, maybe 32. Yeah, that's a much rounder result. Again, these primitives, the good thing about those is they come with polygroups, as you can see. So I can give that an inset, which gives me a bit of a range to work with. Perfect. And now with this polygroup that I just select, I can do a quick extrusion. So I'm going to extrude that in a little and accept, and selecting this, I can even shrink it a bit further and can zoom in so you guys get to see what I'm doing. And all I need to do is to bring out the main cylinder. Now I can just extrude this part again, or I can actually make a cylinder and put that cylinder in. So for now, what I can do is just to actually push that back through extrude. So I'm going to do another extrude and push that back a little, and then create a cylinder and place that cylinder in. So you can see how easily I'm sort of, it's just so intuitive and easy to pull and push stuff. Now let me show you something really cool. Let's say I want to just create a boolean in here, like carve out this area, more like a circular shape. And it's just so amazing how easily you can get that done inside Unreal Engine 5. So the way that you do it is through try model rollout. So I'm going to select this piece because that's the area, that's the piece I would like to carve out, and go to poly cut. It gives me a plane which I can just rotate, and anywhere you see that circle, it actually creates a hole. So all I need to do is just to move it and scale it. So basically I'm just going to bring it to the position. Subdivisions also important, so I need to make sure that the subdivision is set to something reasonable so the arc is not too blocky, although you can sort of smooth it later. But you can see how beautiful this looks. The cool thing is it's not just that, you can actually do square and give that a width and scale. You can do sort of a round looking, more of a modern looking quad with round corners, and which is pretty neat. You can do a custom, actually you can draw if you have something really specific in mind. You can draw, it needs to be a closed line. As long as you be mindful of that, that's no problem, it gets the job done. But all in all, I think that kind of gives you sort of sends the point across how this works, how beautiful this is. I just need to rotate it ever so slightly, and I can repeat the same thing for the back. Just going to bring the wheel to the position. Now I can select these guys, select the wheel and hold down Control and move it back to the other side. So we have the secondary wheel. We've got so many tools at our disposal that we can use. One of the useful ones is the freeform deformation. We call that lattice. So if I go to deform and lattice, you can specify points, and these points are going to change the silhouette or the look of the geometry. You just need to give that a division. So let's say 4, 3, 3, and all you need to do is just select these points. You need to make sure not to select anything extra, and you can just move them to change the look of the silhouette or the look of the geometry. So ever so slightly changing it to the left and to the right until you get the desired look. So that kind of really helps the way that this geometry looks. Looks pretty awesome. I mean, I really don't need to do it right now, but you got the gist how this works and the way that you use it. It's just really straightforward. Another one that I do use is plane cut. So plane cut is great if you want to cut the model. You can see how easily you can sort of cut that model. If you realize that, oh, what I had was a bit too long, you can just go in there, use the poly cut and have that cut. Again, we did talk about poly cut as well, where you actually rotate your plane and to the side. So this one, definitely the width needs to be reduced to something like 30, and I can just move it here and go accept. So that's where the pole is going to hold the barrel. Now let's go ahead and create the actual barrel. So for the radius, I think something like 50 is going to be too much, maybe 40. And again, the good thing about that is this comes with PolyGroups. So at any point of time, you can go in here, select and push that back or move it up if you want. Another thing that you can be mindful of, or I think you should be mindful of, is the number of divisions. So if I have that created, I would rather go back to wireframe immediately and see how many divisions I have, so I can create some details on it. Obviously this one doesn't have any division, so I'm going to go in here and create height division, something like maybe 12. Height division should do the trick. And again, I keep the poly mode per face because I don't want to select polygons or quads. I want to select sections or faces. So that should do the trick. I'm just going to go create, complete, and immediately move that to a position. So I'm just going to do that really quick. Freeform or deformation, one of these lattices, I can just easily go in there, select a section and turn that into poly select. So I can just go ahead and select this area, select those really quickly. I'm going to have a look. Yep, it all looks good. Now I'm going to create a poly group. Now these two rings are one poly group. I can go in there and just shrink that bit or increase the height of that, or probably even exaggerate it and create an extrude like so. And then I can go in there and create an inset like that, going ahead and selecting this little guy and then inserting it inward and push that in, or you can even go ahead and delete that if you want. So I'm just going to select that and use extrude. You can also use offset to just push that in if you want. So I'm just going to push that in ever so slightly, and you can see the barrel is coming together nicely. All you need to do is just to apply bevels here and there. For example, I can select this and go ahead and apply bevel to that. It's a bit much, obviously, so I'm just going to reduce that here a bit much. So subtle effect, subtle bevel effect will get the job done, and you can see no time at all I am actually getting the result that I want. I can do the same thing for the back. So I'm going to zoom in, selecting this guy, and in, and done. For the pole, again, it's just a simple cylinder, so I can sort of drop that in, complete. I can just shrink the size of the cylinder, and again, gradually but surely you're sort of adding to what you have and putting these pieces together and creating something that you can actually use in your model. So you can see the workflow is pretty straightforward. There is really nothing to that. It's still a bit work in progress, but I definitely see potential. So we are going to sort of do more of that in the future, but for now that really should do the trick. I think these balls are huge, so I'm going to set that one to 10, one here, one here, and one here, and maybe one here, and maybe one here. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, just very short and sweet, and talked about the bare minimum, the basics of the modeling tool. Obviously, there's a lot going on in here, which we will talk about in the future. As a matter of fact, in the next video, I am going to talk about UV mapping. Let's say we have a model that we modeled inside this application using the modeling editing tool. How on earth are we going to apply UV maps to it? So stay tuned. We are going to continue and pick up where we left off in this video and add more tips and tricks to this area inside Unreal Engine 5. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your support as always, and see you guys very shortly.